I'm Jack Morrison, 65 years old, and this is the story of how my fitness influencer son-in-law learned that calling a retired Marine drill instructor a weak-old man is the kind of mistake that gets you destroyed physically and professionally in front of 100,000 witnesses during your own live fitness event. Especially when that drill instructor spent 28 years breaking down and building up thousands of Marines, understanding human physical limits better than any Instagram fitness coach ever will. 9 weeks after we buried my daughter Amanda, my son-in-law Chad Reynolds posted a video on his social media, showing him doing shirtless pull-ups while talking about how modern fitness had evolved beyond what old-school military training could teach. The video showed Chad's lean, muscular physique as he effortlessly performed 20 pull-ups, then transitioned into a speech about how his Alpha Physique program represented the cutting edge of fitness science that military training couldn't match. He said that while military fitness might have been impressive decades ago, modern fitness influencers like himself had access to advanced training techniques, supplementation science, and performance optimization that made military standards look primitive by comparison. The video got 18 million views in 48 hours and sparked thousands of comments from Chad's followers praising his physique and agreeing that military fitness was outdated. Several comments specifically mocked older veterans, saying they'd let themselves go after leaving service and didn't understand modern fitness culture. Chad liked and responded to many of these comments, encouraging the narrative that his fitness expertise was superior to anything military training provided. I watched that video from my garage gym, the same garage where I'd maintained the same workout routine I'd used for 28 years as a Marine drill instructor. At 65 years old, I could still pass the Marine Corps physical fitness test, still complete the combat fitness test, still do pull-ups, still run 3 miles in under 24 minutes. Chad thought I was a weak old man who'd let fitness decline with age. What he didn't know was that Marine drill instructor training created a level of physical conditioning and mental toughness that didn't fade with age because it was built on fundamentals, not tricks. Before I tell you how Chad learned that Marine drill instructors don't just train fitness, but understand human performance at levels that social media fitness influencers can't comprehend, I need you to do something. If this story resonates with you, if you've been dismissed as past your prime by someone who confused Instagram aesthetics with real functional fitness, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel because what happens next will show you why military fitness training creates capabilities that survive decades, while social media fitness fades the moment the cameras stop. And leave a comment telling me about a time someone underestimated your fitness because of your age. Your stories matter, and I read every single one. Chad Reynolds had married my daughter Amanda 7 years ago when he was 25 and she was 27. He'd been a personal trainer at a commercial gym, reasonably fit and knowledgeable about basic exercise programming. Amanda had been a physical therapist, intelligent and grounded in actual human physiology and biomechanics. Their marriage had seemed solid for the first few years, living in a modest apartment while both built their careers in the fitness industry. Then 4 years ago, Chad had discovered social media fitness influencing, and everything changed. He'd started posting shirtless transformation photos, workout videos, and motivational content about achieving the alpha physique. His initial posts had done moderately well, but when he started incorporating more aggressive masculinity messaging and promising rapid results, his following exploded. Within 18 months, he'd built a following of over 4 million people across platforms, all watching his fitness content and buying his programs. Chad's content evolved into a specific brand of fitness influencing that combined workout advice with broader lifestyle messaging about alpha male behavior, dominance, and physical superiority. He positioned himself as not just a fitness expert, but as a complete lifestyle authority teaching men how to become physically dominant and socially superior. His followers were mostly young men aged 18 to 35 who were attracted to his message that proper training and supplementation could transform them into alpha males who commanded respect and attracted women. The monetization followed predictably. Chad launched the Alpha Physique program, a 12-week training and nutrition plan that cost $997. He claimed it incorporated secret techniques he'd discovered through years of research and experimentation that would deliver results far superior to traditional training methods. He sold supplements through affiliate partnerships, earning commissions on every protein powder, pre-workout, and testosterone booster his followers purchased based on his recommendations. He charged for one-on-one coaching sessions at premium rates. His income from fitness influencing exceeded $40,000 monthly. The lifestyle followed the income. Chad and Amanda moved to a luxury apartment in downtown Los Angeles. Chad bought expensive workout clothing, luxury accessories, and a high-end sports car. He attended fitness expos and bodybuilding competitions as a celebrity guest, networking with other influencers and supplement company executives. He'd completely immersed himself in fitness influencer culture and had built an identity around being an elite physical specimen and alpha male authority. Amanda had initially been supportive but had grown increasingly concerned over the past 2 years before she died. She'd mentioned to me that Chad's physique seemed to be maintained through methods that went beyond natural training and nutrition. She'd found vials of what appeared to be steroids in their bathroom and had confronted Chad about it. He denied using anything illegal and had claimed they were legal supplements, but Amanda's background as a physical therapist made her skeptical. She'd also been concerned about the aggressive masculinity messaging in Chad's content, feeling it promoted unhealthy attitudes about dominance and superiority. Amanda had shared her concerns with me 6 months before she died in that accident, a distracted driver who ran a stop sign and hit her car broadside. She'd said Chad's fitness expertise wasn't as legitimate as he claimed, that his physique was likely steroid-enhanced rather than naturally achieved, and that his training programs were just repackaged basic exercises sold at premium prices through aggressive marketing. She'd been planning to insist he get medical supervision if he was using performance-enhancing drugs. Then the accident happened, and she was gone before she could intervene. After Amanda's death, Chad had become increasingly dismissive and condescending toward me. He'd make comments about how I'd let myself go with age, how my military fitness background was obsolete compared to modern training science, how traditional strength training was inferior to his optimized programs. He'd post content on social media about how older generations didn't understand fitness and clung to outdated methods like military PT that didn't produce aesthetic results. The provocations escalated over months. Chad would visit for mandatory family gatherings and make comments about my appearance, suggesting I looked weak for my age and should try his training programs. He'd compare his lean, muscular physique to my thicker, functional build and imply that aesthetic appearance was what mattered rather than actual physical capability. He'd talk about how Marine Corps fitness standards were low compared to elite fitness influencer standards and how military training didn't produce bodies like his. Then came the video that made my decision to confront him inevitable. Chad posted content specifically mocking military fitness and older veterans. He showed footage of military physical training and laughed about how basic and unimpressive it looked compared to modern fitness influencing. He showed photos of older veterans who'd gained weight or lost conditioning after leaving service and used them as examples of how military fitness didn't create lasting results. He specifically said that retired military members like his late wife's father represented everything wrong with outdated fitness thinking. They'd spent careers doing obsolete exercises and now were weak old men who couldn't keep up with modern fitness standards. The video got 22 million views and thousands of comments agreeing that military fitness was primitive and that veterans who'd let themselves decline were pathetic compared to fitness influencers who maintained elite physiques. Several comments specifically mocked Marine Corps PT as being easy compared to serious training. Chad responded to these comments enthusiastically, positioning himself as representing evolved fitness knowledge versus the obsolete military approach. I watched that video in my garage gym, surrounded by the simple equipment I'd used for decades: a pull-up bar, weights, a bench, resistance bands. The same equipment I'd trained thousands of Marines with during 28 years as a drill instructor. Chad thought I was a weak old man whose military training had been inadequate. What he didn't understand was that Marine drill instructors weren't just fitness instructors. We were experts in breaking down the human body and rebuilding it to withstand combat conditions, experts in identifying physical and mental weakness, and experts in pushing people past limits they thought were absolute. Here's what Chad didn't know about my background and capabilities. Chad didn't know that Marine drill instructors weren't selected just for being fit. We were selected for demonstrated physical excellence, teaching ability, and mental toughness that exceeded normal Marine standards. I'd been a competitive athlete before joining the Marines, had excelled in every physical test throughout my career, and had been selected for drill instructor school specifically because my fitness and leadership abilities were exceptional even by Marine standards. Chad didn't know that drill instructor school was 12 weeks of the most physically demanding training the Marine Corps offered. We'd been required to demonstrate mastery of every exercise we'd teach recruits, to perform at levels far exceeding minimum standards, to maintain peak conditioning while working 18-hour days training recruits, and to exemplify physical excellence that would inspire and intimidate the Marines we'd train. The attrition rate for drill instructor school was high because the physical and mental demands broke people who weren't truly elite. Chad didn't know that during my 28 years as a drill instructor, I'd maintained physical conditioning that exceeded what most active duty Marines achieved. I'd trained my body to demonstrate every exercise perfectly, to perform conditioning workouts alongside recruits who were 30 years younger, to work 18-hour days 6 days a week while maintaining peak fitness. I'd done thousands of pull-ups, hundreds of thousands of push-ups, run thousands of miles. The muscle memory and conditioning built over decades didn't simply disappear. Chad didn't know that at 65 years old, I still maintained a training routine that would break most 30-year-olds. I still did pull-ups, full range of motion, strict form, multiple sets. I still did hundreds of push-ups daily. I still ran, though now at a pace adjusted for age but still respectable. I could still pass the Marine Corps physical fitness test that men 40 years younger struggled with. My body at 65 maintained functional fitness that exceeded what most people half my age achieved. Most importantly, Chad didn't know that his impressive physique was built on steroids, lighting, angles, and Photoshop rather than the superior training methods he claimed. I'd been watching his content with the eye of someone who'd seen thousands of different body types and fitness levels. The signs were obvious to someone with my experience. The disproportionate muscle development, the unnaturally low body fat maintained year-round, the rapid changes in size that natural training couldn't produce, the acne on his back visible in some videos, the aggressive behavior patterns consistent with steroid use. I'd also noticed that Chad's actual demonstrated fitness abilities in videos were unimpressive compared to his physique. He'd post videos of his workouts showing mediocre form, limited range of motion, and weights that weren't particularly heavy for someone his size. His cardio conditioning appeared poor based on how quickly he fatigued in videos showing extended activity. His physique was impressive aesthetically, but his actual functional fitness, the ability to perform physically demanding tasks over time, was questionable. The final provocation came when Chad announced he was hosting a major live fitness event in Los Angeles called the Alpha Physique Challenge. The event would feature 100,000 live stream viewers watching as Chad led workouts, demonstrated his training methods, and challenged audience members to compete in various fitness tests against him. He promoted it as an opportunity to see elite fitness in action and to learn from someone operating at the highest level of physical development. Tickets for in-person attendance cost $500 each, and 2,000 people had purchased them. Chad posted promotional content specifically mocking older men and military veterans. He said the event would show the difference between modern, optimized fitness and obsolete approaches like military training. He said he'd challenge anyone who thought traditional strength training was superior to his methods. He invited skeptics to attend and see if they could match his performance. It was clearly directed at me, challenging me to show up and be humiliated by demonstrating that I couldn't match his elite fitness level. I purchased a $500 ticket to Chad's Alpha Physique Challenge event. The event was scheduled for 3 weeks later at a large venue in Los Angeles with capacity for 2,000 in-person attendees plus the 100,000 expected on the live stream. Chad didn't know I'd be attending. He probably assumed I'd never accept the implicit challenge because I'd be too intimidated to expose my supposed weakness publicly. What Chad didn't understand was that Marine drill instructors don't back down from physical challenges, especially from fitness influencers who'd built careers on steroids and social media angles. He'd called me a weak old man and had challenged me to prove otherwise. I was going to take him up on that challenge in front of 2,000 people and 100,000 live stream viewers. And I was going to demonstrate exactly why Marine Corps functional fitness training created capabilities that survived decades, while social media aesthetics were just poses that couldn't perform. The weak old man was about to destroy the alpha fitness influencer. and it was going to be captured on video for millions to watch. The morning after purchasing my ticket to Chad's Alpha Physique Challenge, I began preparing for the event with the same methodical approach I'd used during 28 years of training Marines. The goal wasn't just to attend and watch. I was going to participate in Chad's fitness challenges and demonstrate in front of 2,000 people and 100,000 live stream viewers that Marine Corps functional fitness at 65 years old exceeded the steroid-enhanced aesthetics of a 32-year-old fitness influencer. I started by analyzing Chad's content systematically to understand exactly what his fitness capabilities were versus what he claimed them to be. I reviewed hundreds of his workout videos, paying attention not to the impressive physique or the aggressive editing, but to the actual movements, weights, ranges of motion, and endurance displayed. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Chad's functional fitness capabilities were mediocre despite his impressive appearance. His pull-up videos showed partial range of motion. He'd hang from the bar, pull himself up about 3/4 of the way, then drop back down. That wasn't a legitimate pull-up by Marine Corps standards where full extension at the bottom and chin clearly over the bar at the top were required. When I counted only his legitimate full-range pull-ups and videos, the number dropped from 20 to perhaps 8 or 9. His push-up form was similarly compromised. He dropped to about halfway down, barely touching his chest to the ground if at all, then press back up. Marine standards required chest and thighs touching the deck simultaneously and full arm extension at the top. His claimed running abilities were even more questionable. Chad rarely posted cardio content because it didn't showcase his physique well, but when he did, the footage showed him gasping for breath after short distances. In one video where he'd attempted to time a 3-mile run, he'd stopped multiple times to walk and had finished in well over 30 minutes, a pace that would fail the Marine Corps physical fitness test even for the oldest age bracket. His cardiovascular conditioning was poor despite his lean appearance, suggesting his low body fat came from steroids and severe calorie restriction rather than from actual cardio training. I also analyzed his strength training content. The weights he lifted in videos were impressive looking, but when I calculated the actual load relative to his body weight and compared it to expected strength standards for someone his size, the numbers weren't exceptional. He appeared strong because of his muscular appearance and because he used camera angles and video editing to make lifts look more impressive. But when I analyzed the actual weight on the bar in videos where it was visible, his strength levels were good but not elite, certainly not matching what his physique suggested they should be. The steroid use was increasingly obvious the more content I analyzed. Chad's muscle development showed the characteristic patterns of steroid enhancement, disproportionately developed upper body, particularly shoulders and traps, which have high concentrations of androgen receptors. His body fat stayed unnaturally low year-round, without the fluctuations that natural bodybuilders experienced. His muscle mass had increased dramatically over a relatively short period in ways that natural training couldn't produce. Several videos showed acne on his back and shoulders, a common side effect of steroid use. His skin had the thin, vascular appearance that came from pharmacological enhancement. I also noticed behavioral patterns consistent with steroid use. Chad's content had become increasingly aggressive and confrontational over the years. His marketing emphasized dominance and superiority in ways that seemed exaggerated beyond normal competitive confidence. Several videos showed him becoming irrationally angry about minor issues. His late-night social media posts sometimes showed erratic mood patterns. These behavioral changes aligned with the psychological effects of long-term steroid use. While analyzing Chad's capabilities, I maintained my own training routine and actually increased my preparation for the event. At 65 years old, I wasn't trying to match the physique of a 32-year-old on steroids. That would be impossible and wasn't the point. I was preparing to demonstrate functional fitness capabilities that would exceed what Chad could actually perform despite his impressive appearance. Pull-ups, push-ups, running, obstacle work, endurance exercises, the fundamental tests of human physical capability that Marines trained for. I worked with my doctor to ensure my training increase wouldn't cause injury. Medical evaluation confirmed I was in excellent health for my age. Blood pressure normal, heart function strong. No joint or connective tissue problems that would limit performance. My doctor was actually impressed that a 65-year-old maintained the conditioning to do legitimate pull-ups and distance running. He cleared me for increased training intensity and said my functional fitness exceeded 99% of men my age. I designed my training program around the specific challenges I expected at Chad's event. If Chad was going to challenge audience members to fitness competitions, they'd likely be basic tests like pull-ups, push-ups, sprints, and maybe some obstacle or endurance challenges. I trained these movements specifically, working on form, endurance, and explosive power. Not to look impressive, but to perform maximally within my capabilities. At 65, I couldn't match the absolute numbers of a 30-year-old, but I could demonstrate capabilities that would shock people who'd been told I was a weak old man. 3 weeks of focused training brought me to peak condition for my age. I tested myself on the Marine Corps physical fitness test and scored in the first-class range for my age bracket: 20 pull-ups with strict form, 85 crunches in 2 minutes, 3-mile run in 23 minutes and change. Those numbers would qualify me for recognition if I were still on active duty. More importantly, they exceeded what I'd seen Chad demonstrate in any of his videos when judging by actual performance standards rather than aesthetic appearance. I also prepared psychologically using techniques I'd learned during drill instructor training. Mental preparation was as important as physical capability. I visualized the event, anticipated challenges, prepared for how Chad would respond when confronted. Marine training had taught me that winning physical confrontations often came down to who maintained composure under pressure and who broke first. Chad was used to controlled social media environments where he could edit and curate content. A live event with 2,000 witnesses and 100,000 viewers wouldn't allow editing or multiple takes. 2 weeks before the event, Chad posted another provocative video. He showed himself training and said he was preparing to embarrass anyone who thought they could match his fitness level at the upcoming challenge. He said he expected some old-school fitness guys might show up thinking their outdated training methods were sufficient, but they'd learn quickly that modern optimized fitness was on a different level. He said specifically that military-style fitness might have been impressive 50 years ago, but that evolution had made those methods obsolete. The video showed Chad doing his signature workout. Lots of shirtless posing, impressive-looking exercises with mediocre form, aggressive music, quick cuts to hide his actual fatigue and limitations. His 4 million followers loved it, flooding comments with praise for his physique and agreement that modern fitness had surpassed traditional methods. Several comments mocked older veterans specifically, saying they were living in the past and couldn't understand that fitness science had evolved. Chad liked these comments and responded that the event would prove his superiority over outdated approaches. I didn't respond on social media. Marine drill instructors didn't fight battles on social media where editing and narrative control mattered more than truth. We fought battles in person where physical reality couldn't be edited or faked. Chad would learn the difference at his event. 1 week before the event, Chad released the schedule and format. The Alpha Physique Challenge would run 3 hours with Chad demonstrating his training methods, leading group workouts, and then hosting what he called the Ultimate Fitness Gauntlet, a series of physical challenges where audience members could volunteer to compete directly against Chad. The challenges would include pull-ups, push-ups, a sprint race, and what Chad called the Alpha Endurance Test, a circuit of exercises performed for maximum reps in a time period. Chad's promotional content made clear he expected to dominate every challenge. He said most audience members wouldn't even volunteer because they'd recognize they couldn't compete. He said anyone who did volunteer would be quickly eliminated and would learn humility about their fitness limitations. He positioned the challenges not as friendly competitions, but as opportunities for him to demonstrate physical dominance and prove his alpha status was earned through superior capability. The event format was perfect for what I planned. The challenges Chad designed were exactly the functional fitness tests Marines trained for: bodyweight exercises, sprints, endurance circuits. These were tests where technique, mental toughness, and decades of training mattered more than aesthetic appearance or steroid-enhanced muscle mass. Chad had created the perfect venue for his own destruction, though he didn't realize it yet. I flew to Los Angeles 2 days before the event. I checked into a modest hotel near the venue and spent the time visualizing the event, maintaining my training with light workouts to stay sharp without fatigue, and mentally preparing for the confrontation. I'd contacted several of my former Marines who lived in the Los Angeles area and mentioned I'd be attending Chad's event. 5 of them, men now in their 40s and 50s who I'd trained decades ago, said they'd come to the event for support. They'd seen Chad's videos mocking marine fitness and wanted to see their former drill instructor remind everyone what real functional fitness looked like. The morning of the event, I woke at 0500 with the same internal clock that had governed my schedule for 28 years of Marine service. I completed a light workout, pull-ups, push-ups, stretching, just enough to activate muscles and ensure full range of motion. I dressed in simple athletic clothing, gray Marine Corps PT shirt, black running shorts, running shoes. No flashy fitness influencer gear, no branded merchandise. Just the basic uniform I'd worn for decades of training. I arrived at the venue at 0900, 2 hours before the event started. The location was a large convention center with an open floor space set up for the fitness challenges. There was a main stage where Chad would present, workout areas with various equipment, and obstacle course elements set up for the challenges. 2,000 seats surrounded the floor space for the in-person audience. Large screens were positioned to broadcast everything to both the in-person audience and the 100,000 expected live stream viewers. I took a seat in the middle section, not trying to hide, but not drawing attention either. The venue filled rapidly with attendees, mostly young men in their 20s and 30s, many wearing fitness influencer merchandise, many with physiques suggesting they trained seriously even if not at elite levels. Several were filming everything on their phones, already posting to social media about attending Chad's event. The energy was excited and anticipatory, everyone expecting to see impressive fitness demonstrations. My 5 former Marines found me and sat nearby. We didn't make a spectacle, just 5 men in their 40s and 50s and one 65-year-old quietly waiting for the event to begin. Several younger attendees near us made dismissive comments about older guys attending a fitness event, clearly assuming we were out of place and couldn't possibly understand modern fitness culture. We ignored the comments. Marines didn't waste energy on verbal sparring when physical demonstration would settle everything. At 1100 hours, the event began. Music blared, lights flashed, and Chad made his entrance to enthusiastic cheering. He walked out shirtless wearing only athletic shorts, his lean muscular physique on full display. The lighting made his physique look even more impressive than in photos. Definition sharply highlighted, muscles appearing larger than reality, the aesthetic presentation maximized. He looked like a fitness magazine cover, and the audience responded with exactly the admiration he'd anticipated. Chad's opening presentation was 20 minutes of him demonstrating exercises, talking about his training philosophy, and positioning himself as representing the pinnacle of modern fitness knowledge. He showed off his physique from multiple angles, did demonstration sets of various exercises with form that looked impressive to untrained eyes, but was technically flawed, and made continuous references to how his methods exceeded traditional training approaches. He specifically mentioned that old-school military fitness was primitive compared to modern optimized training that incorporated cutting-edge supplementation and recovery protocols. The audience ate it up. Thousands of young men watching someone they'd followed on social media, now seeing him in person, believing they were witnessing elite fitness expertise. Chad was in his element, controlling the presentation, looking impressive, delivering the performance his followers expected. This was his world, where appearance mattered more than performance, and where he could curate the narrative. Then Chad moved to the audience participation section. He invited volunteers to come down to the floor area and join him in workout circuits, positioned as opportunities to learn from him directly and to test themselves against his training methods. Dozens of audience members rushed down, eager for the chance to work out alongside their fitness influencer idol. Chad led them through several circuits. Combination exercises, high-intensity intervals, movements designed to fatigue people quickly and make Chad look superior by comparison. The audience members struggled, as designed. They fatigued quickly, many stopping or dropping out of exercises. Chad continued performing, or appearing to perform, while participants struggled, reinforcing the message that his fitness level exceeded what his followers could achieve. The whole presentation was choreographed to make him look dominant and to make audience members feel inferior. It was ego-building theater disguised as fitness education. After the group workouts, Chad announced the ultimate fitness gauntlet. He said this was the opportunity for anyone who thought they could match his fitness to compete directly against him in specific challenges. He said most people wouldn't dare volunteer because they'd recognize they couldn't compete. He said anyone who did volunteer should prepare to learn humility when they discovered how superior his fitness level was compared to theirs. Chad announced the first challenge, maximum pull-ups. He said he'd demonstrate first, then anyone who wanted to challenge him could attempt to match or beat his number. Chad stepped to the pull-up bar and began performing his signature partial range of motion pull-ups. He completed 20 repetitions with the same three-quarter range of motion I'd seen in his videos. Impressive looking, but not legitimate by Marine Corps standards. The audience cheered enthusiastically, convinced they'd witnessed elite performance. Chad stepped away from the bar and asked if anyone wanted to attempt to beat 20 pull-ups. The audience was silent. 2,000 people and no one volunteering, either intimidated by the challenge or believing it was impossible to match what they'd seen. Chad smiled confidently and started to move on to the next challenge. I stood up from my seat in the middle section. The movement caught attention, and people around me turned to look. Chad saw someone standing and invited whoever it was to come down if they wanted to try the challenge. I walked down the stairs to the floor, a 65-year-old man in a plain gray Marine Corps PT shirt approaching the fitness influencer stage. The audience reaction was immediate, laughter and dismissive comments. People were saying things like, "Seriously, Grandpa thinks he can do pull-ups? And this is going to be embarrassing, and someone should stop him before he hurts himself." Chad's expression showed a mixture of amusement and disbelief. He clearly hadn't expected an old man to volunteer, and he seemed delighted by the opportunity to humiliate me in front of everyone. I reached the pull-up bar and looked directly at Chad. I introduced myself clearly so both the in-person audience and the 100,000 live stream viewers could hear. I said I was Jack Morrison, 65 years old, retired Marine drill instructor with 28 years of service. I said I'd seen Chad's videos mocking military fitness and calling Veterans Week old men. I said I was here to demonstrate what Marine Corps functional fitness looked like at 65 years old compared to steroid-enhanced social media aesthetics at 32. The audience reaction shifted immediately from laughter to shock and confusion. Chad's confident expression cracked visibly. The weak old man he'd been mocking wasn't some random elderly guy. He was a Marine drill instructor who'd just called him out publicly. Chad tried to recover, saying age didn't matter if the physical capability wasn't there, and that we'd see who was actually fit. I stepped to the pull-up bar. The venue went silent. 2,000 people in person and 100,000 on live stream, watching a 65-year-old Marine prepare to do pull-ups after a 32-year-old fitness influencer had just completed 20. I gripped the bar with my hands shoulder-width apart, the same grip I'd used for thousands of pull-ups over 40 years. Then I began performing pull-ups with strict Marine Corps form. Full extension at the bottom with arms completely straight. Pull until chin clearly over the bar at the top. Controlled descent. No swinging or kipping. The first 5 were smooth and controlled. The audience was stunned into silence. At 10, people started murmuring. At 15, Chad's face had gone pale. At 20, the audience erupted in shocked applause. At 25, I dropped from the bar and stood calmly, not even breathing hard. I'd just done 5 more legitimate pull-ups than Chad had managed, and I'd done them at 65 years old with stricter form than he'd used at 32. The weak old man had just demonstrated that Marine Corps functional fitness exceeded steroid-enhanced influencer fitness by any legitimate measure. And this was just the beginning of Chad's destruction. The venue erupted in shocked applause after I completed 25 strict form pull-ups and stepped away from the bar. The sound was different from the cheering that had followed Chad's performance. This was genuine surprise and amazement rather than rehearsed enthusiasm for a social media celebrity. 2,000 people and 100,000 live stream viewers had just watched a 65-year-old man outperform a 32-year-old fitness influencer on the first challenge of the event Chad had designed to showcase his superiority. Chad stood frozen on the floor, his confident demeanor completely shattered. He'd been expecting to dominate every challenge and humiliate anyone who dared compete against him. Instead, he'd just been outperformed by the retired Marine drill instructor he'd spent months mocking as a weak old man. His face showed a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and the beginning of real fear as he realized this wasn't going according to plan. I looked directly at Chad and spoke clearly so both the audience and the live stream could hear. I said that was 25 pull-ups with proper form, full extension at bottom, chin over bar at top, no kipping or swinging. I noted that Chad's 20 pull-ups had been partial range of motion that wouldn't count by Marine Corps standards. I suggested that if we were counting legitimate pull-ups with proper form, Chad had probably done 8 or 9 at most. Several audience members who'd been Marines or had military experience shouted agreement, confirming they'd noticed Chad's form was compromised. Chad tried to recover by claiming that his pull-up style was an advanced training technique that incorporated different muscle activation patterns and that strict form versus functional training variations were matters of different philosophical approaches. I responded that there was no philosophical debate about pull-up standards. The Marine Corps had defined requirements for a reason, and partial range of motion wasn't a variation. It was incomplete execution that indicated insufficient strength to complete the full movement. The audience was now watching with different energy. What had started as a showcase for Chad's fitness dominance had transformed into a direct challenge between a social media influencer and a retired military trainer. Many in the audience were recording on their phones, capturing everything for social media. The live stream chat was exploding with reactions, most expressing shock that an old man was outperforming the fitness influencer they'd followed and paid to see. Chad announced we'd move to the next challenge: maximum push-ups in 2 minutes. He said push-ups were a better test of total upper body endurance and conditioning. He clearly hoped to recover his dominance on a challenge where he'd have an advantage. Chad dropped to push-up position and began performing repetitions. Like his pull-ups, his form was mediocre, partial depth, minimal chest contact with the ground, incomplete arm extension at the top. He performed rapidly, prioritizing speed over form, and completed 98 repetitions in 2 minutes before collapsing in apparent exhaustion. The audience applauded, though less enthusiastically than before. 98 push-ups in 2 minutes was impressive looking, and many audience members probably thought it was an unbeatable number. Chad stood up, breathing heavily, clearly fatigued from the effort. He challenged me to match that performance, his tone suggesting he believed I'd exhausted myself on pull-ups and couldn't possibly complete a competitive number of push-ups. I dropped to push-up position. I'd done thousands of push-ups over 40 years of Marine service, in morning PT, as punishment details for recruits, as personal conditioning, as demonstrations. Push-ups were as fundamental to Marine fitness as running or pull-ups. At 65, I couldn't match the absolute numbers of a 30-year-old, but I could perform with form and consistency that would demonstrate superior functional fitness. I began performing push-ups with strict Marine Corps form. Chest and thighs touching the deck simultaneously at the bottom, full arm extension at the top, back straight, no sagging or arching. My cadence was controlled and steady rather than frantic. Each repetition was deliberate and complete. At the 1-minute mark, I'd completed 45 repetitions. At 90 seconds, I'd completed 67. At the 2-minute mark, I completed my 85th repetition and held the up position until time expired. I stood up and looked at Chad. I said that was 85 push-ups with proper form, full chest to deck, full arm extension, maintaining body alignment. I noted that of Chad's 98 claimed push-ups, perhaps 60 would count by Marine Corps standards because he'd been doing partial repetitions. I suggested we ask any Marines or military veterans in the audience to confirm whether my assessment of Chad's form was accurate. A dozen hands went up throughout the venue, and several men stood and confirmed loudly that Chad's push-ups hadn't been legitimate, full range of motion. Chad was visibly shaken now. He'd just been outperformed again, or at minimum matched by someone 40 years older than him on a challenge he'd designed. The alpha fitness influencer narrative was collapsing in real time. The audience was murmuring with a mixture of amazement and schadenfreude. They'd paid $500 expecting to see their fitness idol dominate, and instead they were watching him get embarrassed by a senior citizen. I pressed the advantage. I said we'd now completed 2 of Chad's challenges, and I'd outperformed him on both using legitimate standards. I suggested we move to the next challenge, but first I wanted to address something important. I said that Chad had built his career claiming superior fitness knowledge and mocking traditional training approaches, particularly military fitness. I said I wanted the audience to understand what real functional fitness looked like versus steroid-enhanced aesthetics. I asked Chad directly if he was using performance-enhancing drugs. The question landed like a bomb. The venue went completely silent. Chad's face went bright red, and he stammered that the accusation was insulting and unfounded. I responded calmly that I wasn't accusing without basis. I was asking a direct question based on observable evidence. I said Chad's physique showed multiple indicators of steroid use, including disproportionate muscle development, unnaturally low body fat maintained year-round, and physical changes that natural training couldn't produce in the timeline he documented on social media. I also noted that Chad's actual functional fitness performance didn't match his appearance. His pull-up and push-up numbers were mediocre for someone claiming elite fitness and were significantly lower than what someone with his muscle mass should be able to achieve if that muscle mass came from functional strength training. His cardiovascular conditioning appeared poor based on how quickly he fatigued. These discrepancies suggested his physique was built through pharmaceutical enhancement rather than through the superior training methods he sold to his followers. Chad denied everything, saying his physique and performance were the result of his Alpha Physique program and proper supplementation with legal products. He said accusing him of steroid use was a desperate attempt to undermine his credibility because I'd been challenged by his success. He appealed to the audience, saying they'd followed his journey and knew he'd built everything naturally through hard work and his proprietary training methods. I responded that if Chad claimed natural development, he should have no objection to proving it through drug testing. I said I'd arranged for a licensed medical testing service to be present at the venue and that I was willing to submit to comprehensive drug testing immediately. I challenged Chad to submit to the same testing, suggesting that if he was natural as claimed, the test would vindicate him and prove my concerns were unfounded. If he refused to test, the audience could draw their own conclusions about why someone claiming natural fitness wouldn't prove it when challenged. Chad was trapped. If he agreed to testing and the results showed steroid use, his career would be destroyed. If he refused to test, he'd look guilty and his credibility would be damaged almost as badly. He tried to argue that submitting to drug testing because of baseless accusations would set a bad precedent and that his word should be sufficient. But the audience wasn't accepting that deflection. People were shouting that if he had nothing to hide, he should take the test. The live stream chat was flooded with demands that he prove his claims. I continued pressing. I said Chad had spent months attacking my military service and calling veterans weak and outdated. He built his brand partly on claiming superiority over traditional fitness approaches, including Marine Corps training. Now, when challenged to prove his fitness was legitimate and superior, he was refusing to back up his claims with objective evidence. I said that Marine Corps values included integrity and accountability. We didn't just make claims, we proved them. I suggested Chad's refusal to test indicated he valued his image more than honesty. The audience reaction had shifted completely. What had been admiration for Chad had transformed into skepticism and anger. People had paid $500 to attend and many had purchased his $997 training programs based on believing his fitness expertise and results were legitimate. Now they were watching him refuse to prove his claims when directly challenged. The energy in the venue had turned hostile toward Chad. One of my former Marines who'd been sitting in the audience stood up and identified himself loudly. He said he was a former Marine I'd trained 20 years ago, that I'd been his drill instructor at Parris Island. He said I'd been 65 years old and had just demonstrated better functional fitness than a 32-year-old who claimed to be an elite athlete. He said that should tell everyone something important about the difference between real training and social media fitness. Several other former Marines in the audience stood and added their support, confirming that Marine Corps fitness training created lasting capability that social media aesthetics couldn't match. Chad tried to regain control by suggesting we move to the remaining challenges where he believed he could still demonstrate superiority. He announced the next challenge would be a 400-meter sprint race. He said speed and explosive power were areas where youth and optimized training would show clear advantages over older traditional approaches. He was clearly hoping that in a sprint, his younger age would give him an unbeatable advantage regardless of my pull-up and push-up performance. We moved to the track area that had been set up on the convention center floor. 400 meters marked with cones in a rectangular pattern. Chad and I took positions at the starting line. The audience pressed close to watch, phones out recording. The live stream had swelled to over 200,000 viewers as word spread on social media that a fitness influencer was being destroyed by a 65-year-old Marine. The starter counted down, and we began the sprint. Chad exploded off the line with the speed of youth, pulling ahead immediately. He reached the first corner well ahead of me, his conditioning appearing strong. But by the second corner, I noticed his pace beginning to flag. His breathing was labored, his form deteriorating. By the third corner, the gap between us had stopped widening. I maintained steady pace, using the pacing discipline I'd learned from thousands of miles of Marine Corps runs. On the final straight, Chad was visibly struggling. His sprint had become a labored run. I was still maintaining steady pace, closing the gap. We crossed the finish line with Chad ahead by perhaps 10 meters, a victory for him, but nothing like the dominant performance he'd anticipated. And more significantly, Chad collapsed after crossing the line, gasping desperately for air, while I was breathing hard but still standing and controlled. I pointed out to the audience that Chad had won the sprint by a small margin, but had completely exhausted himself in the process. I noted that in military fitness, the ability to sustain effort mattered more than winning a single sprint. I asked what good Chad's impressive physique and sprint speed would be in actual combat conditions where you needed to carry equipment long distances, maintain performance over hours, and have reserve capacity for unexpected demands. I suggested his cardiovascular conditioning was poor despite his appearance, likely because maintaining extremely low body fat and high muscle mass through steroids compromised endurance capacity. Chad was still on the ground trying to recover, unable to respond. The visual was powerful. The fitness influencer collapsed and gasping, while the 65-year-old Marine stood calmly discussing functional fitness concepts. The audience was filming everything, capturing the stark contrast between appearance and capability. I announced that I had one final challenge for Chad. I said he designed this event to prove his alpha status and superior fitness. I'd now outperformed him on pull-ups and push-ups and had nearly matched him on the sprint despite being 65 years old. I challenged him to one more test, the Marine Combat Fitness Test Maneuver Under Fire event. It was an 880-yard course involving sprints, crawls, buddy carries, ammunition can lifts, and agility obstacles. It tested total functional fitness in a way that aesthetic appearance couldn't help with. Chad was still recovering from the 400-meter sprint. He said, gasping, that he'd already completed 3 challenges and had proven his fitness. I responded that he'd lost 2 challenges and barely won one, and that he was refusing to face a comprehensive test because he knew his conditioning couldn't handle it. I said if he truly believed his Alpha Physique program created superior fitness, he should be able to complete a test that every Marine had to pass. His refusal would prove that his fitness was purely aesthetic and couldn't perform in any practical application. Chad tried to argue, but the audience was chanting for him to accept the challenge. His own followers who'd paid to see him demonstrate dominance were now demanding he prove his claims. The live stream chat was merciless, calling him a fake and demanding he either do the test or admit his fitness was fraudulent. Chad was cornered with no way out. I offered him an escape with conditions. I said if Chad publicly admitted that his physique was steroid-enhanced rather than natural, acknowledged that his fitness capabilities didn't match his appearance, apologized for mocking military service and veterans, and agreed to refund everyone who'd purchased his training programs under false pretenses, I'd consider the challenges complete and wouldn't force him to attempt the combat fitness test that would likely injure him given his poor conditioning. Chad stood there on the convention center floor, surrounded by 2,000 people who'd paid $500 to see him demonstrate alpha dominance, being broadcast to over 200,000 live stream viewers, having been physically outperformed by a man 40 years older, and now facing the choice between admitting fraud or attempting a physical test that would destroy him. The alpha fitness influencer who'd called me a weak old man was about to have his career ended in the most public way possible. Chad stood in the center of the convention floor, surrounded by 2,000 in-person attendees and broadcast to over 200,000 live stream viewers, facing the impossible choice I'd given him. Admit his fitness empire was built on steroids and lies, or attempt the Marine Combat Fitness Test course that would likely expose his poor conditioning even more dramatically than the challenges already had. His face showed complete devastation. The confident alpha fitness influencer persona had completely crumbled, replaced by someone who understood his entire career was collapsing in real time. The silence in the venue was absolute. Everyone was waiting to see how Chad would respond. Phones were recording from every angle. The live stream chat was moving so fast it was unreadable, thousands of comments per second demanding Chad's response. This moment would define everything that followed. Either Chad would admit the fraud, or he'd attempt the test and fail spectacularly. Either way, his career as a fitness influencer was finished. Chad finally spoke, his voice quiet and defeated. He said he couldn't complete the combat fitness test course because his conditioning wasn't adequate for that type of sustained effort. He admitted that his training focused on aesthetics and short-duration performance rather than functional endurance. He said his physique had been enhanced through performance-enhancing drugs, including testosterone and other anabolic steroids that he'd been using for over 3 years. He said he'd started using them to compete with other fitness influencers who had more impressive physiques and had continued using them as his social media following grew and the pressure to maintain his appearance increased. The audience reaction was immediate and explosive. People were shouting, some in anger about being deceived, others in vindication at having their suspicions confirmed. Several attendees were demanding refunds for their $500 tickets. Others were filming Chad's admission and posting it immediately to social media. The live stream viewer count surged past 300,000 as word spread that a major fitness influencer was admitting steroid use and fraud on camera. Chad continued, perhaps realizing that complete honesty was his only option now. He admitted that his Alpha Physique program didn't incorporate any secret training techniques or superior knowledge. It was just basic exercises repackaged with aggressive marketing. He admitted that the transformation photos he'd posted showing dramatic results from his program were mostly from clients who'd also used steroids, though he'd never disclosed that. He admitted that his own functional fitness capabilities were mediocre despite his appearance, and that he'd carefully avoided demonstrations that would expose his poor endurance and conditioning. I asked Chad about his attacks on military service and his claims that Marine Corps fitness was obsolete. Chad said those attacks had been motivated by insecurity. He'd felt threatened by people with legitimate fitness credentials and real physical capabilities, so he'd attack them to make himself seem superior by comparison. He specifically apologized to me and to military veterans generally for dismissing their service and their fitness training. He acknowledged that what I'd demonstrated today, functional fitness capabilities maintained for decades through proper training, was far more impressive than steroid-enhanced aesthetics that couldn't perform when actually tested. Then I asked Chad to address the refund policy for people who'd purchased his programs under false pretenses. Chad said he'd issue full refunds to anyone who'd purchased the Alpha Physique program or attended this event. He said people had paid for expertise and results he couldn't legitimately deliver, and they deserved their money back. He said his business would probably collapse from the refunds and from loss of credibility, but that was the consequence he'd earned for building everything on lies. The venue erupted in shouting and chaos. Some people were trying to get Chad's attention to demand immediate refunds. Others were leaving, disgusted by the fraud they'd witnessed. Many were on phones posting to social media or calling friends to tell them what had happened. The event that was supposed to be Chad's triumph had become his complete destruction, all captured on video and broadcast to hundreds of thousands of people. Event security had to intervene to prevent the situation from becoming dangerous. They escorted Chad off the floor and to a back area, away from the angry crowd. The event organizers announced that the Alpha Physique Challenge was concluded and that full refunds would be processed for all attendees. They apologized for hosting an event that had turned out to involve fraud and said they'd be implementing stricter vetting procedures for future fitness events. I remained on the floor for another hour talking with attendees, many of whom wanted to thank me for exposing Chad's fraud before they'd spent more money on his programs. Several young men said they'd been following Chad's content and had felt inadequate because they couldn't achieve the results he'd shown. Learning that his results came from steroids rather than from the training program he sold made them feel less like failures. One man said he'd been considering starting steroids because he thought that was the only way to achieve fitness success, but seeing my functional fitness at 65 demonstrated that sustainable natural training was more valuable than pharmaceutical shortcuts. My 5 former Marines who'd attended for support came down to the floor. We spent time talking about Marine fitness philosophy and why functional capability mattered more than aesthetic appearance. Several younger attendees gathered around to listen, genuinely interested in learning about training approaches that created lasting results rather than temporary social media appeal. One of my former Marines joked that I'd just conducted the most effective drill instructor training session of my career, breaking down an overconfident recruit in front of 300,000 witnesses. We all laughed, though the lesson had been serious. The videos from the event went viral within hours. Multiple attendees had posted complete recordings of the pull-up challenge, the push-up challenge, the sprint, and most importantly, Chad's admission of steroid use and fraud. By that evening, the combined videos had been viewed over 50 million times across various platforms. Chad Morrison's name was trending on multiple social media platforms, but now as an example of fitness influencer fraud rather than as fitness inspiration. Chad's social media following collapsed overnight. His 4 million followers dropped to less than 500,000 within 24 hours as people unfollowed or as his accounts were suspended by platforms for violating terms of service regarding deceptive practices. His remaining followers were mostly people documenting his downfall or demanding the refunds he'd promised. Every post he'd ever made about fitness expertise, superior training methods, and alpha physique excellence was now being mocked as evidence of fraud. The fitness influencer community scrambled to distance themselves from Chad. Many posted statements saying they'd always suspected something was off about his claims and that they promoted only natural training. Some admitted they'd known Chad was using steroids, but had stayed silent because calling out other influencers was bad for business. The event triggered a broader conversation about steroid use among fitness influencers and about the deceptive nature of social media fitness content. Major supplement companies that had been paying Chad for sponsored posts immediately terminated their relationships and demanded return of sponsorship fees. Several issued statements saying they'd been deceived by Chad's claims of natural training and that they didn't support or endorse steroid use. Athletic apparel brands that had sent him free merchandise requested its return and removed any content featuring him from their marketing. Most significantly, several state attorney general offices opened investigations into Chad's business practices. The fraud allegations were serious. He'd sold training programs for nearly $1,000 each to thousands of people while misrepresenting his qualifications and results. He'd promised results that were only achievable through steroid use, while implying his program alone could deliver those results through natural training. Several law firms announced class action lawsuits on behalf of people who'd purchased Chad's programs under false pretenses. 2 weeks after the event, I received a call from the Federal Trade Commission. They were investigating Chad for deceptive marketing practices and wanted my testimony about what I'd observed and documented regarding his fraudulent claims. I spent 4 hours with FTC investigators, providing detailed testimony about the fitness challenges, Chad's admission of steroid use, and the evidence that his training program didn't deliver the results he'd promised. The FTC said they were building a case for significant financial penalties and injunctions preventing Chad from selling fitness programs or coaching services. 1 month after the event, Chad posted a final video announcement. He'd disabled comments, knowing the response would be hostile. He said he was shutting down his fitness coaching business and would be processing refunds for everyone who'd purchased his programs or attended the Alpha Physique Challenge event. He said the refunds would total approximately $2.8 million and would bankrupt his business and personal finances. He said he was entering treatment for steroid addiction and for the psychological issues that had driven him to build his career on fraud and lies. Chad also announced he was stepping away from social media and public life entirely. He said he'd caused harm through his deceptive practices and his attacks on military service and traditional fitness approaches. He specifically mentioned my demonstration of functional fitness at 65 years old as a humbling lesson that real capability mattered more than appearance, and that sustainable training approaches created lasting value, while shortcuts like steroids created temporary illusions that eventually collapsed. The video was viewed millions of times, but without the admiration Chad's content had once received. People watched it as the final chapter of a cautionary tale about social media fraud and the dangers of building success on lies. Several fitness educators used the video and content about the importance of honest training information and natural approaches to fitness development. 6 months after destroying Chad's career, I was invited to speak at Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton about functional fitness and the value of Marine Corps training philosophy. Over 500 Marines attended the presentation where I discussed the importance of training for capability rather than appearance, the dangers of steroid use and shortcut mentality, and why Marine Corps fitness standards created lasting functional ability. I also told the story of Chad's event, using it as an example of why Marines should take pride in their training and never let civilian fitness culture make them feel inadequate. I also established a foundation using fees I received from speaking engagements and consulting work following the viral videos. The foundation provided fitness education for veterans transitioning to civilian life, teaching them how to maintain the functional fitness they developed through military service. It also provided educational content about natural training approaches, the dangers of steroids, and how to recognize fraudulent fitness claims. The foundation's content reached hundreds of thousands of people looking for honest fitness information in a social media landscape filled with deception. Several military veterans contacted me to say the viral videos had helped them feel proud of their service and their fitness training. Many said they'd been influenced by fitness influencer culture to feel inadequate about their bodies or their training approaches. Seeing me outperform a steroid using 32-year-old at 65 years old had reminded them that functional fitness developed through military training was more valuable than aesthetic appearance created through pharmaceuticals and filters. 2 years after the Alpha Physique Challenge event, I received a letter from Chad. He'd completed treatment for steroid addiction and was working a regular job in a non-fitness field. He wrote that the past 2 years had been the most difficult of his life. Financial ruin, public humiliation, loss of identity that had been built entirely around fitness influencing. But he said the destruction of his fraud empire had been necessary and ultimately beneficial because it had forced him to confront the person he'd become and the harm he'd caused. Chad wrote that my demonstration of functional fitness at 65 had been a profound lesson about the difference between substance and appearance. He said he'd spent years building an impressive exterior while neglecting actual capability, and the moment I'd outperformed him on basic fitness tests had exposed the emptiness of his approach. He said he'd been teaching what he thought people wanted to see rather than what actually worked, and the inevitable collapse of that deception had been painful but deserved. Chad also apologized specifically for his attacks on military service and his claims that Marine Corps fitness was obsolete. He said those attacks had been projection. He'd felt insecure about having no real accomplishments or expertise, so he'd attacked people with legitimate credentials to make himself feel superior. He said watching me maintain fitness capabilities at 65 that exceeded his steroid-enhanced performance at 32 had taught him that real expertise came from decades of consistent work rather than from shortcuts and marketing. I wrote back acknowledging his apparent growth and understanding. I told him that acknowledging mistakes and accepting consequences were signs of character development that had been missing from his fitness influencer persona. I said that if he'd learned that honest work and functional capability mattered more than appearance and deception, the painful experience would ultimately have been valuable. I also told him that Marine Corps values included the belief that people could learn from failures and rebuild with integrity, and I hoped he'd do so. I'm Jack Morrison, 67 years old now. I'm a retired Marine drill instructor who spent 28 years training thousands of Marines, teaching them that functional fitness built through consistent proper training creates lasting capability that survives decades. I'm a father who lost his daughter but honored her memory by exposing the fraud she'd suspected and protecting thousands of people from wasting money on programs that couldn't deliver their promises. Chad Reynolds called me a weak old man and built a career on steroids, lies, and attacks on military service. He claimed his modern fitness knowledge made Marine Corps training obsolete. He mocked functional fitness as primitive compared to his aesthetic approach. He thought his 4 million followers and his impressive physique made him superior to a 65-year-old retiree with a modest garage gym. He learned that Marine drill instructor training creates functional fitness capabilities that don't fade with age because they're built on proper fundamentals rather than pharmaceutical shortcuts. That 28 years of training Marines produces expertise in human physical performance that exceeds anything social media fitness culture teaches. That appearance without capability is just an illusion that collapses when actually tested. To anyone whose fitness has been dismissed because of age, or whose military training has been called obsolete by social media fitness culture, remember this: functional fitness built through proper training lasts for life. Marine Corps fitness standards exist for reasons that go beyond aesthetics. The ability to perform physically demanding tasks, to maintain capability over time, to push through discomfort and fatigue. These are the measures of real fitness, not likes on Instagram or follower counts. Chad's career collapsed because he'd built it entirely on appearance and lies. When tested against someone with real functional fitness developed through decades of proper training, his inadequacy was exposed immediately. The weak old man destroyed the alpha fitness influencer using nothing but basic Marine Corps exercises performed with proper form. This is Gunnery Sergeant Rhett Jack Morrison, United States Marine Corps, signing off. To my fellow Marines and military veterans, your fitness training matters. The functional capabilities you develop through service are more valuable than social media aesthetics. Maintain your fitness, take pride in your conditioning, and prove that military training creates lasting physical excellence that fitness influencers can never match. Semper Fi. The mission never ends, and neither does the discipline that built us.